Christmas and Easter?
It's knowing that my years of experience are celebrated for the value I bring today. Inclusion means recognizing that not everyone eats pork or drinks alcohol.
Caring enough to give me flexibility so I can focus on what's important to me.
It means not being judged for taking time off to be home with my newborn son.
It means not getting assigned extra work because I don't have young children at home.
It means not assuming that I don't want to learn new skills or participate in the latest technology.
At PSCU, we're intentionally working together to create an environment where ideas, backgrounds, and perspectives are harnessed to deliver possibilities for credit unions. Inclusion means everyone, including you.
Suncoast Credit Union was founded in 1934 and operates out of 21 different counties. We have 63 branches, and we have over 1,500 employees throughout the state. We have a very tight-knit group that really focuses on the members, but also focuses on each other. We provide a lot of different benefits for our employees. In fact, I would even call this the land of opportunity. So if you work hard, you show initiative, and if you have a passion for the business and learning things and inquisitive and curiosity, that's what we're looking for in our employees. If you're looking for opportunities to move up through the organization, this may be the job for you. In fact, our CEO, Kevin Johnson, started when he was in high school and is now the Chief Executive Officer of Suncoast Credit Union. Suncoast Credit Union is an amazing place to work. Whatever job you do, whatever role you have in this organization, you have a way to impact and change our members' lives for the positive.
Inclusion is intentionally bringing people in rather than unintentionally keeping people out.
Inclusion is behavior that embraces and leverages our differences.
Inclusion is a sense of belonging, connection, and community at work.
Diversity is being invited to the party, and inclusion is being asked to dance.
What does inclusion actually look like in the workplace?
It's seeing people that look like me in senior leadership roles. It's recognition that I bring additional perspective and value to the team.
Where being my authentic self is celebrated.
It means recognizing all holidays, not just Christmas and Easter.
It's knowing that my years of experience are celebrated for the value I bring today.
Inclusion means recognizing that not everyone eats pork or drinks alcohol.
Caring enough to give me flexibility so I can focus on what's important to me.
It means not being judged for taking time off to be home with my newborn son.
It means not getting assigned extra work because I don't have young children at home.
It means not assuming that I don't want to learn new skills or participate in the latest technology.
At PSCU, we're intentionally working together to create an environment where ideas, backgrounds, and perspectives are harnessed to deliver possibilities for credit unions. Inclusion means everyone, including you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the ACUC annual meeting. My name is Shelton Rolak, and I'll be your MC for today's events. I just want to give you all a great hearty welcome and thank you so much for joining us. I'm pleased to see so many faces virtually and excited that you decided to join us. While we plan to be in St. Petersburg, Florida, right about now, the pandemic had other plans. We also recognize that in addition to the pandemic, the social justice events precipitated by the death of George Floyd and recession were affecting communities of color in profound ways. We established the commitment to change, Credit Unions Unite Against Racism, to combat these injustices. I am more than delighted to see how you were able to pivot in May after the board of directors identified it as not in our members' best interest to host an in-person conference, but instead look to see what we could accomplish virtually. And if I'm not mistaken, what was originally planned as a week-long event with daily webinars as an extension of our Commitment to Change initiative flourished into a full-blown virtual conference with keynote speakers, a young professional summit, a financial literacy reality fair for the youth, after-hours networking events, a virtual vendor exhibit hall, our annual meeting, and a closing with a spiritual Saturday event. The AACUC's mission statement is to increase diversity within the credit union community through advocacy and professional development. I am confident that the lineup will inspire you and empower you to lead with diversity, equity, and inclusion for your credit union and communities. A mindset is so critical to these perilous times. We couldn't have done this without you or our president and CEO or our vendors, partner organizations, and countless volunteers who worked tirelessly to organize this event. Now I'd like to introduce Opal Tomaszewicz, our Senior Manager of Multicultural Business Strategy at CUNA Mutual Group, and published poet, to present a spoken word entitled Unprecedented.
Thank you so much, Shelton. My name is Opal, and I am very pleased to be here and so thankful for all of you who have logged on. And I am very excited and honored to be able to share this piece with all of you today to kick off the conference. This is called
Opal,
Unprecedented. Yes.
Opal, please share your video.
It is not allowing me to.
Okay, thank you very much.
I can hold up until it is, no problem.
No, go ahead, Opal.
Still getting the error. Says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Yep, just go ahead and do your spoken word. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you all again. This is called Unprecedented. They say these are unprecedented times, unprecedented for Black lives. I would say that for every Black person in America, every generation has been unprecedented. That is why every time we are underrepresented, it is a crying shame. Like the case of Breonna Taylor, say her name, list her occupation, and don't let her life evaporate like vapors. These Black stories we are telling now are our new freedom papers, displayed proudly, screaming loudly until the world is forced to listen. The pain is getting too heavy on this side. I'm gonna need to switch positions like a mother giving birth. That's why crying out for freedom has become this woman's work. This woman's work is so much more than to kick off a conference. I'm here to put you in a new state of conscience, charged by ancestors, elders, and leaders. We are here to turn capital A allies into B, lever C. This ain't no ordinary session. I'm so honored, AACUC, let me say the blessing over this sustenance you are about to receive. Trust you won't be the same as you came when you leave. You will be changed by witnessing what we call Black excellence, which is the state of being phenomenal in a way that sets precedents and the bar so high only the sky is above you. Still with the down home, open arms embrace, exclaiming, I love you, and not just for your accomplishments or title, but for your core. Each speaker you hear will leave you wanting more of their story, their glory, and their plight. I want you to see how color illuminates with light. I want you to feel each and every Black life. I want you to hear each and every Black wife, husband, mother, sister, cousin, brother, uncle, father, child, and being. This week, I want you to take the blinders off and start seeing us for the very first time. Let's see ourselves with fresh new eyes, and let's kill all the lies of hate and division. Let's call a thing and say racism when it's racism. Let Blackness take the center stage and be enlightened. I challenge each and every one of your frequencies to be heightened to a level that surpasses all understanding. Let's take the Black Matters Live movement beyond branding, demanding justice and peace. As our brethren take it to the streets, in solidarity, we are gathered here for the same goals. I'm not looking for more people, I'm looking for souls. So inspired by this moment that we make it a movement. This is a commitment to change, not just improvement. So as we stand here in this pivotal point, myself and all of you with me, let's make haste, let's make hope, let's make history. Thank you and welcome to AACUC's 2020 Commitment to Change, Credit Unions Unite Against Racism.
Wow. I'm gonna try to stick to the script, but I gotta give it up to you, Opal. That was amazing, that was phenomenal. The chat is going wild, I'm going wild, my chest is beating. Thank you so much for sharing your gift, sister.
Thank you.
All right, Before we get started with the presentations, there are a few housekeeping items and announcements I need to share with you. All sessions will be recorded and uploaded by August 24th. The recordings will be accessible the same way that you access the session through the conference center. To maintain the integrity of the recordings, all participant mics have been muted throughout the session. We will have time for a question and answer period at the end of today's session. Please use the chat to ask questions for the presenters, and we will pass them along to the session moderator. If you experience technical difficulties during the presentation, please feel free to send a private chat to our tech team. Each tech team member has 2 asterisks in front of their names. We invite you to share your experience at the conference on social media using the hashtags CTC 2020, AACUC 2020, Changed, AACUC, CU Unite, CU BLM. We also invite you to give us feedback through a short survey at the end of the conference. Donations to UNCF. On Wednesday, we will present an initial donation to United Negro College Fund during the AACUC annual meeting. If you would like to donate to UNCF, please visit the AACUC booth in the virtual exhibit hall or donate directly on the website. We will continue to take donations throughout the conference and will make a second donation on Monday, August 17th. Our goal is to donate a total of $10,000. Now, prizes. At the end of this session, there will be a drawing for prizes donated by our sponsors and exhibitors. If your name is drawn as a winner, we will contact you to arrange delivery of your prize. Finally, thank you to our sponsors. We would like to thank our title sponsor, PSCU, today's program sponsor, Suncoast Credit Union, and all our other sponsors. Thanks to the generosity of our sponsors and exhibitors, we can bring this conference to you free of charge. Please thank them when you visit their booth in the exhibitor hall. I would now like to turn it over to Nicole Wydell, Chief Member Engagement Officer for the Virginia Credit Union League, who will introduce the speaker for our general session. Nicole?
One moment, please. I apologize for this interruption. We would like to have a word of opening from the AACUC Chair, Mr. Adrian Johnson. Mr. Johnson, would you like to say a few words before Ms. Wydell introduces JDIA?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Just want to say good afternoon, everyone. And Shelton already kind of said it, but certainly good afternoon to the AACUC family. Good afternoon to our sponsors. I'm really appreciative of all the attendees. This is certainly a pivotal moment in time. Thank you, Opal, for such a great spoken word. Every time I hear you, I get inspired. But this week is my 2-year term. This week ends my 2-year term as chair. And so I just want to thank everybody, the leadership of the board, certainly without our president and CEO, Renee Sattywhite, without our vendors, our partners, and countless volunteers, the conference committee, and we just have an amazing lineup of sessions. Just want to thank everybody for all the work that they put in. And so as Shelton mentioned, AACUC's mission is to increase diversity within the credit union community through advocacy and professional development. And so the only thing I will leave, and John Lewis said it best, if you see something, you say something, and we got to do something. And so here is a point in time where everybody, we're all in this together. In unity comes strength. And so I think that certainly these topics are very relevant, just an amazing lineup of sessions. And we gotta, at the end of the day, we gotta do something. This is certainly a conference, a virtual conference that's adding value. It's free to all the attendees. So thank you for all our sponsors and vendors. But I'm really looking forward to hearing and witnessing what this week will become. We wish we were at the trade winds down in St. Petersburg, Florida, but as mentioned earlier, the pandemic had other plans. So I'll just hand it off to you, back to you, Angela, And thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. So now we can turn it over to Nicole Waddell from the Virginia Credit Union League. And Nicole, if you want to try to turn on your video for us, it should work now. And if it doesn't, just go right in to our session.
Well, thank you so much, Angela. And unfortunately, it is not allowing me to start video, but good afternoon and welcome to the Handling Emotions and Healing a Community General Session. I am honored to introduce our guest speaker, Jaydia Jackson. Jaydia is a licensed professional and nationally certified counselor. She has provided therapy to men, women, families, couples, teens, and adolescents. Jaydia assists people in developing more effective relationship skills and in dealing with the issues that arise when our relationships are unsuccessful. Please help me give Jaydia a warm welcome.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And I am happy to be here. And that was a beautiful spoken word by Opal. I definitely agree. Fresh new eyes is what we need. And I'm glad to be here to start the conversation around handling emotions and healing a community. So if we can move to my first slide. So Camus Diaz and Jacobson persuasively asserts that race-related emotional wounds will alter one's sense of self. So when people of color relate to others, there's an increased sensitivity to loss due to an invisible emotional wound. And this can be made even worse when those around us reduce our pain, our suffering, and our plight to being oversensitive or angry. But I want you to imagine for a moment, if someone was constantly kicking you in the leg or punching you in the back. However, you had on clothing, so the bruises were not visible. And let's say this person constantly kicked and punched, and then they walked away. And let's say someone else walks up and they did not witness you being punched and kicked. However, they're wondering, why are you agitated? Why do you have an attitude? Why are you angry? And this is it. There's this invisible emotional wound that no one sees that gets played out day after day. Next slide. The Black lived experience is mostly left unacknowledged by white America and corporate America until it becomes too egregious to ignore. As African Americans, we have learned early on to not discuss racial issues in mixed company, which means we usually discuss the discrimination or the racial hurts and slights with other African Americans. Next slide. So thereby, it would be safe to say that most white people are clueless with the lived experience of African Americans. And we wonder, how is it possible that so many don't understand, that so many could be so clueless? But let's face it, talking about racial issues is deemed to be an appropriate conversation, too heavy for white people to deal with. And if it's too heavy for them to deal with, then we tend to not talk about it. Next slide. So here's the thing. In order to have a genuine connection with someone who's different than yourself, you have to be willing to connect and empathize with them. But if you're not able to empathize with their world and their experience, how can there be an authentic connection? It's virtually impossible. Next slide. White people have been taught not to see color at an early age. So thereby, they will make the statement, and I've had this experience of this statement, I do not see color. And often they don't realize, or it doesn't occur to them, that this is dismissal or it's insulting or racist. My mom worked for Saks Fifth Avenue, and I just happened to stop by, and the other salesperson was white, and I said, "Have you seen Maddie Jackson?" And I said, "She's a black salesperson," and it looked like she took pride in saying, "I don't see color," and I was like stopped. Like, how could you not see the beauty of color? Like, there is beauty in seeing color. Next slide. So what's implied in that statement, I don't see color, is whiteness is the norm, which then allows white people not to see racist, discriminatory practices. It also allows white people it also allows them to stop listening. It allows them to stop engaging, understanding, and participating in change, because they're seeing this blandness or what to them is normal versus actually looking to see maybe something else is going on, and this difference is creating a different response. Next slide. So here's a news flash. Racism, racist hate mail, racial comments, racial profiling, racial discrimination, microaggression, all of it hurts. They are very painful to experience personally, vicariously, and second-handedly. But we do what we think is appropriate when it happens to us, especially when it happens and we're still engaging in mixed company, which is to smile, grin, and bear the burden and the pain. Next slide. So I have a quick survey that I would like for us to take. So, how do you handle your emotions? How do you deal with your pain? Right now, we're going through a pandemic. How do you deal with the social distancing? How have you handled people being suspicious of you? How do you deal with mistrust? So, these are some of the answers that I come up with. Do you cry, feel sad or depressed? Do you express anger? Do you struggle with what to do next? Do you ask for help or see a counselor? Or have you just become numb to it? So you can put your responses in the, here we go. Just take a moment and click on your answers.
JD, everyone can see the results on the screen if you want to continue.
So I see that most people struggle with what to do, followed by being numb. And then there's the cry, feel depressed and sad, and express anger. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Next slide. For the most part, when people of color encounter racial slights, what we do is we stifle our pain and any negative emotional reactions so as not to be labeled the ABP, the angry Black person. Because here's the thing, an angry person is seen as a mean person, which translates into deserving bad treatment or what happened to them. So if I get labeled as the angry Black person, this is also somehow a warning for white people to keep their distance, to stop listening, and definitely not engage with me. Next slide. As African Americans, we are holding on to way more pain than we are releasing. However, we don't feel that we have the luxury of expressing this pain. When you think about what do you do with this pain? How do you handle it? And that's what we're talking about. How do we handle our emotional pain? And we're seeing that a lot of times we don't do anything with it. Does this statement that I'm getting ready to make sound familiar to you? I will not give them the satisfaction of knowing they have hurt my feelings. I will not let them know that that bothered me. I will not let them know that they're getting to me. I will not let them know. But if you don't let anyone know that your feelings have been hurt, that you've been disrespected, dishonored, dismissed, whatever it is, how can you ever expect to be healed or recover from the pain? How can you ever expect to move beyond the hurt? Next slide. I get it. Talking about racial issues is deemed to be an inappropriate conversation. And a lot of times we say it's too heavy for white people to deal with. Because when we do begin to have a conversation, there's this defensiveness. I didn't do it. I'm not a racist. And if it makes them uncomfortable, we do not want to have to deal with their discomfort. Because that means I'm going to have to turn and deal and help you out, deal with your pain versus dealing with my pain. So then it's just easier to not have to provide someone comfort when I'm the one that's in pain. So thereby it makes it seem impossible, or it may feel impossible. However, I'm here to say with patience and effort, we can learn to understand each other. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It can be difficult. Think about an argument that you've been having with someone or have had with someone, and it takes time to move forward in that conversation. It may take 2 or 3 conversations, or it may take 2 or 3 months, or even longer. And it's challenging. That can be challenging. However, it's worth it. It's worth the time. It's worth the effort. Because the alternative is to continue deferring the pain. Start my video. What? Okay. So next slide. Next slide. Have you ever wondered what happened to pain or anger that doesn't get addressed? Can any, like, put some comments in the chat. Like, what happens to your anger? What happens to your pain when you don't deal with it, when you avoid it, when you don't get it healed? Like, what goes on? What happens? It gets bottled up. It festers, resentment. It grows. It keeps growing into an explosion. Yeah. Thank you for that. Next slide. So here's the thing, when people feel unheard or unable to express their emotional pain, it will either turn inward, and pain turn inward is depression. Unless there's a chemical imbalance, it's depression. And pain, unexpressed pain, turn outward is anger. And so that's what I've been seeing. A lot of us have this feeling of anger, explosion, rage. It's not uncommon. Next slide. So here's the thing, you cannot heal what you will not reveal. Unhealed emotional pain, unhealed emotional wounds, hurts, all of it will express itself in your behavior and your attitude. It will show up as mistrust, and it will continue to perpetuate itself over and over again throughout your experiences, in your interactions and your reactions. Unhealed emotional wounds and the associated pain is seeking to be healed and released. And this is a financial institution, so most of you are probably familiar with deferred income. And the thing about deferred income is that it has to eventually be recognized, but it's deferred, meaning you're not recognizing it right now. You're referring it to a future period. Well, it is time to stop transferring the pain to the next generation. It's time to stop transferring this pain to our children, who then, if they don't learn how to deal with it, they will also transfer it to their children. But most of us believe being strong is to show no emotion. To be strong, we believe, is to not let them know that we've been impacted by what has happened to us. However, the opposite is true. It takes a strong person to be able to stand and admit that what has happened, that they've been impacted by it, that it hurt, that they felt disrespected, that to be able to show emotions, all of it requires strength because it's going to require vulnerability. It takes courage to live this life, to be open and vulnerable. And the reward for being open and vulnerable and living a courageous life in the face of being disrespected, dishonored, discriminated against, microaggression, to say that hurt. The reward is mental and emotional freedom. The reward is not, the reward is to stop transferring this to our children. The reward is teaching them how to actually deal with conflict. So to assist us in starting the healing process, because that's the second part of this presentation, how do we begin healing the community? The thing that I want you to realize is that healing begins with us. Healing starts with oneself. You cannot heal a community if you are unwilling to heal yourself. Because when you are healed, that's when you can demonstrate and teach and be a stand for healing for everyone else around you. So I have the following questions. Next slide. So, and I want you to as we, I have some people that are gonna share their answers to these questions, but I would like the participants to also use the chat feature to answer these questions, because these are the questions that you would take back to the community. These are the questions that you take back to your work environment. These are the questions that you sit with your children and your family and you engage with them. And these are also questions that we can begin to engage each other in. So I would like Eric and Rihanna to share the first time they realized their racial identity, and share what were your thoughts and your feelings around this experience. Like, what did it teach you about your own race? And were you able to share your thoughts and feelings about this incident?
All right, Rihanna, I'll defer to you, ladies before gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Eric, and thank you, Ms. Jackson, for having me. I am shaking a bit and really counting this blessing because it may not be an experience that everyone had. As far as when I realized my racial identity, it was fairly positive. I am a Southern California girl. I grew up in what a lot of people refer to as South Central Los Angeles. And at the time, it was not the prettiest place. It may have not been the safest space, but it was some of my best childhood experiences. And everyone looked like me when I grew up in Watts. When I was about 9, 10, my family and I moved from South Central to a suburb in Orange County. The city is called La Mirada. And that was the first time I realized not everyone looked like me, but that was okay. My brother and I were new kids on the block, and we were standing at our front door watching these kids play outside. And for whatever reason, you know, just jitters, we were nervous. We wanted to play outside, but we were nervous. And finally, one of the little girls was like, "Come out here." You know, they saw us watching probably like stalkers, and they were so friendly and so kind. And these are people that are still in my life today. I didn't notice it in that moment, but things like when we went swimming, my hair curled up differently now than my friends. All of my other friends in South Central, our hair was all the same. We all followed the same routine. Foods, I noticed, were different. Everyone, you know, cooked differently in this neighborhood compared to what I remembered back living in Los Angeles. So there were these little subtle differences that told me, oh, okay, I'm different. We're not exactly the same. But I would say it was a positive experience. As far as what I learned, I will say that what I've experienced myself as a Black person and many Black people is that we are very resilient and we are able to adapt to any surrounding and thrive.
All right, thank you. So for you, as you started off saying that your experience was positive, and that, and so when you realized going swimming that was when you noticed, oh, the hair is different. Did you mention that to your parents, or did you just make a mental note to yourself, or?
It was more of a mental note. It wasn't necessarily anything that I needed to have a conversation with my parents about. If anything, maybe the conversation was before. You know, Rihanna, when you get out of the pool, don't just go running around. Make sure you rinse off. Make sure you wash your hair. Make sure that you put conditioner in your hair so it doesn't get damaged or break off. You know, there were little to-do things, that my parents, I guess, planted before I went off to do whatever I was doing with my friends. But as far as sitting down and saying, you have to do these things because you're different and this is why, that wasn't a conversation that we had.
Okay, thank you. And Eric, what about you?
All right, for me, just like Rihanna, it sort of started around high school, college for me, a little bit later. I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts, but I went away to college at Virginia State University. It's about maybe 30 minutes south of Richmond, Virginia. And, just going there as a freshman, some of the students we would, since Petersburg, let me just back it up. Petersburg is a Black city, and we were sort of in between Petersburg and a white city called Colonial Heights. So all of the stores that we liked to frequent were in Colonial Heights. So once we would go to these said stores like 7-Eleven, Rite Aid, Walgreens, the happening spots as a freshman in college, we would go there, and they would say that anyone coming into the store with book bags, they would have to leave them at the front of the store. We could not enter into the store, purchase anything if you didn't leave your bag. But people in the neighborhood, they could go into the store with, for a woman, you could have a purse, preferably, like white women going in there. They could have large bags, and there was no issues with them. So I'm thinking, because I went to a historically Black college, and, that they were racially profiling the students from my school. So, as a freshman, I recognized that and I identified that, and I said, wow, this is blatantly racist. But I really didn't say anything or mention anything to anyone until maybe my sophomore year in college, when then I said, you know what, this has to stop. And I really partnered with the Student Government Association with the school, and, I realized that a lot of the students had some of the same concerns that I had with this. And what we did is we had meetings with the Commerce Department with Colonial Heights. And with that, we had some discussion going and just trying to get some understanding of how this was not right and how we could change this, because you're not making the students feel welcome, and we should. So with that, we were able to get some things accomplished, and we were able to have them waive that rule that you would have to leave your book bag at the front of the store before you would enter in. So I thought it was very positive with some of the things that you can do to institute change when you have communication.
Okay, thank you, Eric. And I'm wondering if Sheldon, could you share from the chat feature anything that, maybe 2 or 3 comments that people have posted about their first realization of the racial identity?
Sure, Ms. Jackson. So we have people have been very open and vulnerable, sharing a number of stories. So first one is, in 5th grade, my classmates at my new mostly white school started treating me slightly different after we had our Black History Month lessons, which focused heavily on slavery. That was one experience.
Give me just 2 more.
Okay. Scroll down. Leah Avery, I was in 2nd grade and went to a sleepover. I was the only girl of color there. The owners of the house had a hot tub for us to use. None of the other girls had any problem with getting their hair wet. I was the only one who had to ask for permission and was denied. I had to watch my friends play as I sat on the sidelines.
And is there one more, and then we can move on to?
Wow. I was in kindergarten when another child spit on me and said he hated the N-word.
Okay. All right. So I want to thank everyone for jumping in and sharing. The first time they realized their racial identity. The first time I realized my racial identity was I was probably 6 or 7. And it usually tends to happen at a young age, when it's about realizing that there's something different. And I'm from Alabama, and there were a lot of white people in town, but the energy was anger, and I was wondering what was going on, and everyone was facing the street. And I was with my aunt, and I wanted to see, and she wouldn't pick me up so that I could see over the shoulders of the people there. And I said, well, what's going on? And she said, they're I was like, why are all these white people here? And she was like, when there are some people who don't like black people. And I was like, why? And she was like, they just don't like black people. And in that moment, I realized that, wow, to be black is to be hated. And I said to myself, my thoughts at the moment was I felt bad. And my thoughts were, why did God make us different? Why did God make black and white? Because that's all I knew at that time was black and white. But I went even further. I thought, why didn't God just make us all white? Like, and later on, I thought to myself, why didn't I just think, why didn't God make us all black? And the reason I thought, why didn't God make us all white was because black was hated. There was this disdain toward being black. So I'm like, well, God could have eliminated all of this just by making everybody one color. But I chose white versus black. And I never talked about that with anyone because I grew up during a time period where children were to be seen and not heard. And it's only during this period that I began to talk about it because I just stuck it on a shelf. Like it was a part of the Black experience, the Black lived experience. So I'm going to go on to question number, the second set of questions. So next slide. So Eric had already begun to talk to us about having the experience of racism and the dehumanization of that. And he also pointed out what he was able to do to he shared his feelings about it, and he got change implemented. So I would like for Rihanna, if she can, do you have an experience of have you experienced racism or dehumanization?
Absolutely, thank you. I have. I've experienced racism many of times. In corporate America, I found throughout my career, I often am the only woman of color, the only Black woman. And I was working for a credit union at the time in a branch, and these group of women had come in with their mother, who was older. They were having some issues on their account, some family issues behind it. I wasn't assisting them. I was watching as another rep was, and they were very passionate. People would often label that as the angry Black woman, but there was passion behind their feelings. They were loud. They didn't have the nicest things to say, kind of made a scene in the branch, if you will. Their problem got settled. Everything was fine. Again, I was never helping them. I'm just the Black girl in the office. And my boss found it necessary to come up to my desk and whisper to me, next time your aunties come in here, can you have them tone it down a bit? And I just froze. And as far as the feelings, silence is the first one, because like your slide earlier, you don't want to be labeled as that angry Black woman, the angry Black person. I felt in my right to feel angry, to feel offended, but I just smiled and fake laugh, chuckled it off, and went on to deal with my feelings on my own. And in that scenario, I found it very hard to talk to anyone about because my peers at work didn't look like me. So again, I couldn't express my feelings in this situation toward them without again being labeled as this angry Black woman or sassy. That's another word I hear all of the time throughout my career. And it's hard. I've gotten older and I've grown and I've gotten better at dealing with scenarios as they come. But in that time, silence was the only thing I felt that I can go to. That was all I had.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And you're right, when these things happen, it does silence us in that what is our reaction? How can we respond? And as you said, who do you turn to? Because you were the only woman of color or person of color. So usually when something happens, we turn to people of color. We turn to other African Americans because we feel that they will understand what we're talking about. We feel that there will be more sensitivity or empathy in that experience, and that to speak to someone that doesn't look like us, we think that they won't see it, or to even defend it, to like, right. Don't you get it? And that can be disheartening. Yeah. Thank you for that. Next slide. And as I said, as we're going through these questions, as they show up, because we're going to leave the questions on the slide, we definitely want the participants to feel free to answer and share your responses. And I will turn to Sheldon at some point and ask him to just check in and share with us some of the comments that people are being brave and courageous to share. So I want to turn to Celine, and excuse me if I mispronounced your name, but I want you to share with us a time in your life, either in your family or at work or school, where something racist happened that, or something that reflected internalized racism, and share what was your reaction, what emotion did you experience? And I want you to identify the main message or messages that you learned from this experience.
Yeah, happy to, and thank you all for inviting me to the opportunity in the conversation. I think the incident that I would point out definitely reflects what Rihanna brought up earlier. This idea that you grow up during your youth and you're used to a certain community. So for me, that was the Central District of Seattle, which at the time was predominantly Black, predominantly people of color. And then when I was about 10 years old in the late 80s, early 90s, my mother took me to Federal Way, which was predominantly white at that time. But we, for one reason or another, lived in the part of Federal Way that was much lower income and more Black, and went to a predominantly white school. And I remember many instances from fourth grade, probably all the way till about seventh, eighth grade, being in class, being at recess, being on the bus, and not really having many friends that were white, but getting just the interrogation and the questions from white kids around, why my feet and my hands were so big, or why my nose was so broad or my lips so full, or why I was darker than them, or when I had hair, why it was so nappy. And they just couldn't fathom it because they had never seen anything like me. And it was one thing to be taunted by white kids. It was another thing to then be taunted by your peers who you knew were people of color. But at that time, they might have been more fair-skinned. They might have had curlier hair. They might have even had features that looked predominantly white, but you knew that they were Black. And they would laugh and taunt along with the white kids. And for me, it's, you in that moment, or in those moments, you respond, you're frustrated, you're sad, you're depressed. But I would say over the course of multiple weeks, I start retaliating with my fists. And you say anything about my complexion or my features or my look or even related to my parents, we're gonna go to blows. And so I would get in fight after fight after fight to protect myself and to retaliate. And there was a moment where I finally got suspended from school. And I sent home, and my mother is home waiting for me to probably reprimand me for getting kicked out of school. And she asked me, like, what's going on with you? So I'm like, why are you so upset? And I said, Mom, I hate this place. I hate living here. I hate these white folks, and I hate being Black. Why are we here? And in that moment, I remember her not like comforting me, not even like being able to say, Sol, you need to change your attitude, but in that moment, like she cried. And she like had this outpouring of feelings that you could see that in adulthood, she was still wrestling with the same issues. Like she was still judging her dark skin, her nappy hair, her features every day at work in her life. And she was coping through, with depression, with alcoholism, with many things, but she didn't even deal with it. And so to your point earlier, it's almost as if she projected that onto me and didn't really know in that moment how to comfort me and work me through it. And I would say over time, like I had to come to a place where I could be my authentic self, wrestle with it, channel it, and cope with it. But it took me years, and I took it well into my adulthood, into my workplace, and had many times have questioned how I need to show up, how I need to look, how I need to present myself for this feeling of being accepted and of making white people comfortable around me with my appearance. And it all for me really was rooted in that moment where I think it's less about what the white folks are saying to me specifically, but it's more about that internalized oppression and racism that's showing up in my own mind and body, that reaffirms what they're saying, that reaffirms the ideas that they hold, that makes me have self-hate and self-doubt, or my mother have self-hate and self-doubt because of those messages that have been sent to us over time. And for me as a parent now, I don't want to go too long, but as a parent now, particularly of a young woman who's 13, about to finish middle school, like every day I have to go above and beyond to make sure that her image and her self-worth is far beyond that message of whiteness and that idea of what whiteness should be for Black people.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. That was very powerful. And I felt the pain and the anguish of that experience of you in that new community, the being teased and taunted more so by other people of color versus the white. And that's very painful. I'm really sorry that it happened to you. And I just want to briefly share because I grew up in the 60s. And so I'm thinking we've come a long way in my mind. And I was talking to my nephew, and he was probably 12 at the time, going on 13. And he said, I'm going to marry me a white girl. And I was like, okay. And then, but he followed, in my mind, I'm saying, okay. But then he followed that statement with, because I want my child to have good hair. And in that moment, I'm like, where did that come from? Is what I'm thinking. How is it that we're still dealing with skin color and good hair, bad hair? And I'm wondering where did he get that? Because I'm thinking he's of a much younger age. And I'm just thinking there's way more positive images and role models within the media, within the magazines. And this is what he said. And so my reaction was shock and disappointment. And I felt sad because somewhere along the way, I'm like, how have we failed? How have we failed? Because he's representative of the future that we're talking about, because he's next. And I was wondering, how did I fail? Because it's not so much because he's my family. How did I fail him? How did our parents? How did his parents? How did the grandparents? And so what I learned from this experience is that we still have a lot to do. And so your experience touched me because I still see that pain in this new generation, in this younger generation. Thank you for that. I'm going to move on and continue writing in the chat feature, sharing with us. And can I get to the next slide, please? So, Wesley, would you be open to sharing with us, what did you need your loved ones to teach you about race? What message did you need to hear and see in the world about race? And what positive reinforcements did you need and still need?
Yeah, definitely. Let me first just say good afternoon to everyone, and thank you, Ms. Jackson, and definitely thank you, AACUC, for this opportunity. What did I need from my loved ones? You know, thinking about that question, I would say two things. I needed to know my history, or the history of the Black race, and two, I would say I needed them to share their stories. And so the Black community has such a rich history that sometimes gets boxed into this February month, right? But as you start to unpack that, you realize that we as a people, the leaders, individuals, collectively have done so much for not only our community, but this nation and the world at large. And so every time I hear one of those stories, personally, I always get inspired, right? It makes me realize, hey, I can do what they did. It's kind of that hero for me, if you will. And I think going to my parents and hearing those stories, or even my uncles. My dad was an immigrant, came over from South America. And actually just recently he shared a story of how when he got over here, he worked extremely hard in a company and was passed up for a promotion to take over by a white guy. And the white guy didn't even last a month on the job because he had no real experience. But the interesting thing, his boss told him that he said, hey, honestly, I'll tell you why I didn't give you the promotion. It was because you were Black. And the way his manager was raised, that's just, he was looking out for, I guess, his people. And so hearing those types of stories, or even you just mentioned, Ms. Jackson, you know, I think sometimes we forget segregation, integration. That really wasn't too far off, right? My mom, she was in high school when this happened. So her stories that she can share with me, or my uncles who both were in interracial marriages, hearing those stories, I think would have helped me to better articulate how I need to present myself in the world. Not only that, I think it would have done a lot for me to understand, why is it that they had to work so hard? Why is it that dad wasn't home until 9 p.m. every night? Why was it when I woke up to go to school, he was already out the door? And a lot of that really is from the context that they knew the world to be, and really wanting me to have a better life. And so I think definitely hearing those stories and actually reading the question, you know, I was inspired I want to go ask them, right? And I would actually encourage everyone on the call, if you don't know those stories of your relatives, I would encourage you, go ask them. I mean, those are the stories we need to hear, because those stories are what we can relate with. And that's what helps us build our perspective as we're doing life in this world. And to the second question, what message did I need to hear and see in the world about race? You know, Ms. Jackson, I think the realities of what is really going on. And so as I was growing up, as many of you on the call were growing up, you could probably affirm with me the fact that we didn't have all this social media, right? There wasn't all these news outlets, and the internet wasn't nearly as large as it was, 15, 20 years ago. It's massive right now. And so the messages that I heard were kind of like one-offs, right? It was similar to the stories we heard. It was happening in my school, or happening on the playground, or happening on family trips in random places. But now I think what we're seeing is just feels so unprecedented, because it's in our face, right? It's live, it's on the internet, we can access it immediately, it's on our social media feeds. And I think those are actually the messages we need to see, because as we've seen, what it does is, it spurs the entire nation, the entire world to get behind a cause. Look at what we're doing right now, this commitment to change. And so I wonder, if I hadn't seen that message, if all of us hadn't seen that message of what was really going on, the realities that were going on in our world, would we even be here today saying, hey, we want to commit to change, right? And to your last question, what positive reinforcements do I still need, or did I need? I think it kind of goes back, it plays back into my first response, in that I think that support system from my family, my friends, peers, of just knowing that there was other people who looked like me, who thought like me, who were experiencing same things that I was, that I wasn't kind of on this isolated island by myself, but that I had people who were out there who could reinforce and say, hey, Wes, you know what? I'm experiencing that too, right? Hey, I have a similar story. Let me share this with you. Let's try to unpack this together. I think, and really what I still need is, I think for all of us, but I'll speak for me specifically, is just the support when there is an injustice. I think about a time when I was in college, and I had a neighbor who was completely racist. Long story short, it got so bad. This is going to sound funny, and I chuckle thinking about it, but he actually went to the college and told the dean of education that I was burying dead white people in the front of my yard, and that I was running an anti-white supremacist group out of my house. Needless to say, I took him to court. I learned a lot through that process. One of the things to this question is the community, my friends, my family, they all came to reinforce the fact that this guy was off his rocker, and that I had a courtroom full of everybody from the police commissioner to the dean of education who actually came to the court trial on my behalf. And so, you know, I think we all still need that, right? And we hear it when something happens in the Black community. You hear the stories of, like Martin Luther King said, when there's not justice somewhere, it's an injustice everywhere. And I think I'm getting that quote wrong, but if you follow Martin Luther King, you know what I'm talking about. And so we find that when there is that injustice, to me, it would really help to get that true support to say, hey, Wes, I may not know everything that's going on. I may not even have all the details, but you know what? I'm going to support you in this cause because I believe in you, and I believe that what you stand for is real. And past that, I would say just knowing the positive reinforcements to say, hey, you're good enough. Your thoughts are good enough. You're more than what somebody says about you. You're more than what somebody labels you as. And so all those things collectively, I think, are true positive reinforcements that I did need, but definitely still need as we continue on into these crazy times.
Wow. Thank you so much, Wesley. That was very powerfully said. And you're absolutely right. There is a need for our history and herstory to be shared continuously and not just during Black History Month. Also, we need to be reminded that there's no shame in our past experiences. And sometimes I think we don't talk about the things that have happened because of shame. And Dr. Brene Brown says one of the ingredients for shame is secrecy. In other words, when we have this unwillingness to talk about what has happened, it continues that story. It continues the thing that we're attempting to not have show up. I'm going to move along in the interest of time, but you're absolutely right. I also, that we need to, as this generation, to continue educating and reminding our younger people of where we've been and where we're moving toward. And in the interest of that question, I would like all of the panelists, next slide please, to answer this question right here. Next slide. As a person of color, what do you want? And I'll start at the beginning with Rihanna. If you can share, what do you want?
I would say that I want compassion. I too often, we have these experiences where the first thing people see is the color of our skin. They don't care about our background, who we are, where we came from. There's this immediate, feeling that they have towards us just based on what we look like. And I feel that if we all had more compassion to take time and understand the person, their heart, who they are, this is where we can start to see change. I feel like it's a heart problem, right? This hate is all taught. These people were raised with this hate. So if they stopped for a moment to be compassionate and understand someone who's different from you, that's where we start to see change.
Okay. So for you, compassion, because when people are compassionate, and that leads to them being able to understand differences, and thereby we can live with the differences. Okay, thank you. What about you, Eric? What, as a person of color, what do you want?
I basically just want us to become more organized as far as when we protest versus rioting and looting, because there will be more incidents incidences that will happen to Black people. So I just want us to be strategic and organized. I mean, just last night, I live in Chicago, there was looting last night. 13 cops injured, 2 people shot, and 100 people arrested. And this happened in a prominent area in Chicago, the Magnificent Mile, where there's a lot of high-end shopping and things of that nature. And they said really what happened is it stemmed from a cop-involved shooting early on in the day. And basically that the looting was organized over social media and that it spilled into the downtown Chicago area. You know, I just think sometimes, you know, we could just channel our energies and channel these things into the local grassroots organizations that have an ear for the city officials and state officials, and then we can just become more effective than just every time something happens to us, we just sort of go into this rage and fury and really not accomplish anything, in my opinion.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say that you want is when it comes to the protesting, to have it be more organized and strategic, and versus rioting and looting, and more having an ear for the political part of it so that our message can actually be heard versus being diluted or distracted by the rioting and the looting. Is that accurate? Or
Correct.
Yeah, because it's this rage that then distracts from the true message that people are wanting to be heard, and the looting and the rioting also distracts from the message. I get that. All right, thank you. Let me see. Next is Salon. So, am I pronounce your name for me, please?
It's Solon.
Solon.
Yeah,
I so apologize.
But thank you for asking, Ms. Jackson. No worries. I think my remarks are very much in line with Rihanna and Eric. I think in terms of this idea of compassion from my white folks, I want to be seen. And I don't only want to be seen on your terms. Like, I don't want to be seen when you want to appropriate my culture. I don't want to just be seen when you need to process your guilt and your shame and your fragility. I don't even, quite honestly, and I may get too deep here, I don't want to be seen when you just need like a DEI or a community engagement strategy and then want to make it hard to hire somebody to do that strategy because you want like the Ivy League upper echelon person to do the role. Like, I need you to be real about the lived experience, the Blackness, the humanity that I hold, and see that every day through your support, your investment, and your endorsement as white people. That's what I need. And to Eric's point, for people of color, and particularly Black people, we need to do what we can in this moment and teach our kids to hold that torch as well in the struggle. And I would love to see us be more proactive in the things that will take us further, like organizing around Black wealth and investment, having a bigger political strategy than just getting people to vote, but actually like who is getting in office and on what terms, and how are we making sure that we're seeing more Black and brown faces as a force in political office so that we can truly change the structures and just not the voting practices. I would love to see more organization and those types of things, because in my mind, that's a longer term strategy that will really give us a weight and a force to carry.
Okay, well said. So what I'm hearing you say that you would like to have, or what you want is for white people not to just parade you out when they need that Black person or that figure. You really want them to stay involved and to continue to engage and to have you show up because you're qualified for it versus, oh, I need this particular look or I need this particular image now. Once you done help them figure out what the problem is, then they turn away from you and then go for a different image. You also spoke to that we as Black people need to teach our kids, or for those of us who are teaching our kids, to continue teaching our kids, to not forget that knowledge is the thing that will allow us to do better, or at least to choose to do better. And you can't really change something if you don't understand what it is that you're trying to change, and you can't change something if you don't understand yourself, because it always begins with oneself. And you also spoke to about just not organizing and rocking the vote, but helping us to understand that vote, what that vote means. In other words, that sometimes we think it's just about getting the president in, but a lot of times the real power is at the local level. The real power is in Congress, our congressperson and our senators. And so for us to understand that, and also about Black wealth, that it's time for us to begin to teach and educate us about Black wealth. And because at the end of the day, it's this long-term approach that's gonna really begin to have everlasting change, is what I heard you say. All right, thank you. And finally, that leaves us with Wesley. What do you want as a person of color?
So this was a very tough question. I had to think a lot about it, and those are some great answers. To follow up, what I want is perspectives. And so what does that mean? I really want for people to try. I mean, try as hard as you can to look at other perspectives. Look at the shoe on the other foot. And so what does that really mean practically? It means that examine the language you use when you're talking to people of color. Examine the communication methods, whether that's something as simple as an email or a text message, how that may come across. We've got a lot of professionals, credit union folks on the line. I mean, even walking into your credit union buildings, I wonder just the imagery within the buildings, how does that reflect? What's the perspective that a Black person would have as they walk into that building, that place of business? And so, you know, I think on the flip side, I'm going to give you that in return, right? I think if we see that someone is willing to listen to our perspective and then try to sympathize, I understand, right, that empathizing is going to be extremely difficult, probably won't ever get there, but you can sympathize to the point where you say, hey, I want to know your perspective. And can you explain, if you don't understand, explain that perspective to me. So not only can it help me in my individual life, but perhaps I can take that back to my family, my place of work, wherever it is, and say, hey guys, you know what? I think we're missing something here. I'm talking to my Black friends, and I'm realizing like my perspectives, our perspectives are all off right now, and we need to do a shift in how we think. So yes, perspectives.
Okay, so thank you for that. That was very good. Because when I'm hearing you say perspective will allow white people to actually move toward sympathizing, or they'll never be able to live the Black experience, but it will expand their understanding if they pay attention to the imagery, pay attention to the language that they're communicating with us. If they begin to examine all of that and just begin to look, versus thinking that there is no need for diversity because everybody is we're all human. And true, we all is these different experiences that are happening, and the desire to empathize will be expanded once they take on a different perspective. I want to thank the panelists. That was awesome. I want to thank the people who chose to share in the chat feature. And I want to get to the part about how do we begin continuing the healing part of it. So can I get the next slide? Because when we heal, there's some additional things that we can do. This is a part of the talking part of it. And as all the panelists have said, we need to be willing to share our experience, and for white America to actually listen without judgment to our heart truth. In other words, it is time for them to stop being defensive and saying they're not a racist or they got a Black friend. We really need you to stand in this place of openness. Next slide. As I said earlier, knowledge allows us to choose to do something different. And knowledge also has the power to heal emotional wounds. And when you're ready and willing to feel it, you can heal it. The most important part of healing is this willingness to be healed. And as our panelists have demonstrated, that willingness, that's what it looks like, that willingness to talk. And the other part of it is the willingness to listen. Next slide. So when we come together and support one another, because that's what healing is also going to take, there has always been this community grief. And I'm sorry, I got a tickle in my throat. And so throughout the healing process, we will have to remain committed to this acronym of healing, meaning being honest. Honesty is essential. We cannot heal if we're not willing to tell the truth about our experience. It's not about sparing someone else's experience, because when you do that, then you put their feelings ahead of your feeling, and you are important. Empathy. Empathy is, I've already shared that. In order for you to empathize with someone else, you first have to know who they are. You cannot be detached from other people. And our ability to be honest about our experience, it really brings it up close and personal for our white friends, because now they will go, this isn't something that they're seeing on television. This is something that they seeing happen to their coworker or even their boss or their babysitter or their daughter's or son classmate mom. In other words, when we begin to actually share our experience, it makes it personal to them as well. And when stuff is personal for people, then they can actually begin to feel, and that's that vicarious experience, that vicarious pain. Acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is actually acknowledging what happened to the other person. And it's not about saying, oh, I understand. It's not about popping in and sharing with them how you understand by either sharing what happened to you or sharing what happened to someone that you know. Acknowledgement is actually saying to that person, I am sorry that happened to you. Acknowledgement is giving them back what they shared with you, which says that you were listening. You're standing and you're acknowledging their pain. You're standing and being a witness to what happened to them, and that also allows them to heal. The last part of this acronym is love. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. Love has the power to heal. What you need to do when you're standing with someone who's sharing their pain is to send them love from your heart chakra, to come from this place of total love. You surround them with love, you enfold them with your love. And when you do that, they can actually feel that, because love has the energy, love has power in it. Even when you say, I'm sending love, you can say it verbally or you can say it subconsciously when you're standing with someone. And this is a strategy. This is an actual tool to help you heal and to help others heal as well, because it's about us coming together and supporting each other. Next slide. So finally, as the panelists have already shared, we have to be willing to learn from one another. We are each teaching each other. In other words, everyone has value. Everyone's experience has value. We have to be willing to continue to support each other and to stay involved. In other words, right now, this energy that's going on, eventually it's going to dissipate. However, stay involved at the level that you know how to stay involved. Don't just think that it's over because 6 months from now or a year from now, we can see some movement, but it's still about staying involved. We definitely want to continue to have these table talks. As I said, you want to go back to your job, you want to do it within the schools, in your communities, wherever you volunteer, and definitely at home. Continue to educate yourself and educate others. one of the things that I had to do was to educate myself about who I was as a Black person in America. I did not get it in the school system. Luckily, I was living in New York City at the time, so it was a little easier to find books and resources, go to workshops and seminars, and there were a lot of people there that I could talk to that showed me who I was as a Black person. And I would also say my grandmother was very instrumental. She said to me, color does not mean anything. Black does not mean you're less than, and white does not mean you're better. Next slide. And so as we reach the end of this presentation, as we're coming to a close, I would like to know, what do you know now that you didn't know before you started? Or are there any questions people have or comments that you want to share? And I turn it back over to you, Sheldon.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Adaya. Thank you so much, panelists. This was a really, really powerful session. Thank you, Ms. Jackson, for entering the space. Thank you, AACUC, for creating this safe space for us to hash out these issues and everybody's vulnerability and openness. I know a lot that I didn't know, and I appreciate you guys for sharing your wisdom with me. As we prepare to close out, I want to once again give a virtual round of applause to everybody that participated on today's panel. And I want to give you a few more announcements for you all. If you are currently not a member of AACUC and would like to stay engaged, we encourage you to join AACUC, visit the AACUC booth, or join directly on aacuc.org, the organization's website. Please visit our vendor exhibit hall, which is open until 6:30 p.m. The Young Professional Summit mental health event begins at 5 p.m. The women's chat discussion at the corporate table and men's chat on reflection start at 6:30 p.m. The AACUC After Hours Networking in the Digital Era special event starts at 7:15. We look forward to seeing you at one of these events, folks. As you can see, the conference planning committee went all out, right? They took the virtual ball and ran with it. So let's support these folks. We truly appreciate you joining us for the day one of the Coalition's Commitment to Change Conversation Series, virtual conference. We hope that you were inspired, I know I certainly was, and empowered to make a difference. We encourage you to keep the conversations going tonight and tomorrow at your organizations and on social media with our hashtags. Thank you again for your support, and we will see you soon. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. You guys did great.
Thank you. Bye.